The alien princess was moments from execution. Then one human stepped forward. I never planned to change the course of galactic history. I was a sergeant, a nobody. My job was to stand behind a thin rope at the back of the biggest courtroom in the known universe and watch aliens argue about trade routes. That was the whole assignment. Stand there, stay quiet, and try not to embarrass the human race. For 18 months, that is exactly what I did. My name is Declan Hale. I served 6 years in ground combat before they transferred me to the diplomatic security detail. They sent me to the Tribunal Citadel, a station the size of a small moon, orbiting a dead star in neutral space. The Citadel was the Supreme Court of the Concord of 12, an alliance of 12 elder species that had ruled this part of the galaxy for over 40,000 years. Humanity was not a member. We were what they called a provisional observer species. We had 3 chairs, a narrow desk, and a data pad with limited access. We had no voice, no vote, and no legal standing. We were furniture. I spent most of my time reading. The Concord's legal code ran 900 volumes. Somebody had translated it into our language years ago, and it sat in our little database collecting digital dust. I read all of it. Not because I am brilliant, because I was bored out of my mind. That reading saved a life. The day everything changed started like any other morning on the Citadel. I walked into the Grand Tribunal chamber with Ambassador Yuan Li Fang, our observer ambassador. She was in her 70s, sharp as broken glass, and confined to a wheelchair that she navigated through crowded corridors, like a warship through open water. She had spent 20 years earning the thinnest sliver of respect from the elder species. I admired her more than anyone I had ever served under. The chamber was different that morning. Every seat was filled. Representatives from all 12 species packed the galleries. The air tasted like metal and ozone, and something chemical I could not name, but the biggest difference was above us. The annihilation lattice, a weapon built into the ceiling that could erase a living being down to their last atom, was glowing. I had never seen it active before. It hummed low and deep, a sound I felt in my teeth. They brought her in through the lower doors. Princess Elindra Svethkaya, heir to the Velari sovereignty, one of the 12 founding species of the Concord. The Velari were tall and beautiful, in a way that made your chest hurt. Their skin looked like polished white stone, threaded with glowing veins of light, and they had 4 arms and eyes that changed color with their emotions. Elindra was young by their standards. She had spent the last decade arguing that younger species like humans deserved a real place in the Concord. She had made powerful enemies doing it. They had put her in gravity shackles. The devices pinned her 4 arms against her body and forced her to her knees on the conviction floor, a sunken pit below the 12 thrones of the judges. Her glow, normally bright, had faded to almost nothing. She looked small down there. She looked like someone who had already been broken before the sentence was read. Archon Dreth Vosun, the Chief Justice, read the charges. Conspiracy against the Concord. Unauthorized sharing of restricted navigational data with non-member species. Sedition. The penalty was quantum annihilation, complete erasure. No body left behind. No trace she had ever existed. I watched and I listened. I noticed things. The trial had lasted only 2 days. The evidence was classified, and even her own defense team had not been allowed to review it. Those defenders, all Velari, had withdrawn their representation that very morning, and sitting on the prosecution bench, perfectly calm, perfectly composed, was Lord Sathar Cole, her own uncle. I had been paying attention for months. I knew what this really was. Elindra's crime was not treason. Her crime was politics. She wanted to open the Concord to younger species. She wanted to share the navigational archives that the elder species had kept locked away for thousands of years. That threatened the power of beings like Sathar Cole. So he manufactured charges, stacked the court, and silenced her defenders. This was not justice. This was a political execution dressed in legal clothing. Everyone in that chamber probably knew it. Nobody was going to say it. I leaned toward Ambassador Yuan. "This is wrong," I whispered. She did not look at me for a long time. Then, very quietly, she said, "We have no standing here, Sergeant. We are observers. We observe." She was right. Humanity had nothing. No fleet that could challenge even one elder species. No political weight. No allies. The observer mission was the only thread connecting us to the broader galactic order. One wrong move, and we would be cut loose. Alone in the dark again. I understood all of that. I was not stupid, but I had read the manual. 3 months earlier, during a sleepless night, I had found something buried in volume 714 of the Concord Legal Code. It was called the Right of Acknowledged Debt. The provision stated that if a condemned individual had performed a service of existential significance to any species, member or non-member, a representative of that species could invoke the right and demand a formal review of the sentence. The invocation could not be refused. It overrode even the authority of the tribunal itself. The provision was ancient. It had not been used in over 4,000 years. Most legal scholars considered it a relic, a piece of ceremonial language with no real teeth. But it was still in the code, and it was still binding. And I knew something else. 2 years earlier, Princess Alindra had personally intervened when the Velari border fleet was ordered to deny passage to a damaged human colony ship called the Meridian Hope. That ship carried 12,000 civilians, families and children in a failing vessel with 6 hours of life support remaining. Alindra overrode the local commander, opened the passage, and provided navigational data that guided the ship to safety. She did it quietly, without fanfare. It barely made our news feeds back home. 12,000 people were alive because of her. Those people had gone on to found a colony called New Meridian, which had since grown to 85,000 souls. The Archon raised one massive limb toward the annihilation lattice. The hum deepened. The glow intensified. Alindra closed her eyes. Her bioluminescence flickered once, like a dying heartbeat. Vosun spoke the final words. If no voice speaks for the condemned, let silence confirm the judgment of the 12. Silence. Thousands of representatives from 12 species, and not one of them moved. I looked at Ambassador Yuen. She looked back at me. Her eyes were bright and hard and unreadable. She gave me the smallest nod. It was barely a movement at all, just an exhale that shifted her chin by a fraction of an inch. But I saw it. I stepped over the rope. The sound of my boots on the crystal floor was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Every head in the chamber turned. Every eye, every sensor, every compound lens focused on me. A human, a nothing species, a provisional observer, walking onto the conviction floor like I had any right to be there. I stopped 10 paces from the princess and faced the Archon's throne. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. My mouth was dry. I was certain my voice would break. I spoke anyway. I invoke the right of acknowledged debt, Volume 714, Provision 33 Ether, of the Concord Legal Code. The condemned rendered a service of existential significance to my species. I am here as the voice of 12,000 human lives she preserved. I demand a formal review of this sentence, as is my right under your own law. The chamber erupted, not with violence but with noise. The insectoid Keth Saran clicked their mandibles in rapid agitation. The Velari delegates surged to their feet. Sathar Kol was standing, his glow blazing red, the color of fury. Archon Vosun slammed his resonant staff against his throne. Silence returned, but it was thin and brittle. He stared down at me with those massive compound eyes and called my invocation an absurdity. He said humans had no legal standing. He called the right of acknowledged debt a ceremonial relic. I did not flinch. I told him the right's text contained no clause limiting invocation to member species. It said any species. Humanity is a species. I am a representative of that species. I was not invoking it ceremonially. I was invoking it literally, under the full weight of the Concord's own law. Then I said something I had not planned. I said that if the Archon refused a lawful invocation, he was not upholding the law, he was breaking it. And if the Concord's highest court broke its own law to execute a woman who saved 12,000 lives, then every species in this chamber would know exactly what the Concord's justice was worth. The silence that followed was different from any I had heard before. It was the silence of 12 ancient civilizations, realizing that a human had just trapped them with their own rules. Vosun called a recess. I stood on the conviction floor for hours because leaving it would have withdrawn my invocation. My legs ached. My hands shook. Alindra was still nearby in her shackles. She opened her eyes and looked at me. Her glow shifted to a color I had never seen, something between silver and pale gold. I did not know what it meant. Sathar Kol approached me during the recess. He spoke perfect human standard language. He told me I was making a mistake that would cost my entire species. He said our observer status could be revoked. He said human colonies existed in space the Velari could reach in days. I looked at him and said nothing. Sometimes silence is the loudest thing a human can say. When the judges returned, Vosun announced that the right had been verified. It was binding, but I would need to prove existential significance before the full tribunal. He gave me 20 hours. I worked through the night in our tiny office, a repurposed storage closet with 3 terminals. Ambassador UN called in every favor she had. Unexpected allies appeared at our door. A legal scholar from the Drenathi species brought historical precedents. An Ulfar officer provided clean copies of the Meridian Hope's distress signals. A young Velari aide who had once served Aelindra smuggled us a data crystal containing evidence of Sathar Kole's conspiracy. I realized something during that long night. Aelindra had not just helped humans. She had inspired a quiet network of beings, across multiple species, who believed the Concord could be better. They could not save her themselves. Their own politics would not allow it. But a human, someone with nothing to lose and no political chains, could do what they could not. Sometimes the advantage of being a nobody is that nobody expects you to be brave. I presented my case the next day. I was not eloquent. I stumbled over the formal legal phrasing. I mispronounced species names. I was running on no sleep and bad coffee. But my evidence was solid. I showed the navigational logs proving the Meridian Hope was dying in Velari space, denied passage by official order. I showed Aelindra's personal override command. I showed the medical reports proving the ship had 6 hours left. I showed the passenger manifest, 12,000 names. I read some of them out loud. Families, children, people who were alive right now because one woman chose compassion over protocol. For my final argument, I did not cite legal code. I stepped forward and spoke from somewhere deep in my chest. You ask me to prove existential significance. I cannot put a number on what a life is worth. But 85,000 of my people are alive right now, building homes and raising families, because Princess Aelindra decided that the right thing mattered more than the convenient thing. If that is not existential significance, then your law has no meaning. And if your law has no meaning, then neither does this tribunal. The judges deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, Archon Vosun was no longer contemptuous. He was careful. He announced that the right of acknowledged debt was satisfied. The sentence was vacated. Aelindra would be held in neutral custody, pending a full independent review of her conviction, and that review, by the terms of the right, would include representatives from the invoking species. Humanity had just earned a seat at a Concord legal proceeding for the first time in history. The gravity shackles deactivated. Aelindra stood, unsteady but upright. She walked to me. She was a full head taller, luminous even in her prisoner's garments. Her glow was that silver-gold color again, and I later learned it meant something that did not translate perfectly into any human word. The closest meaning was recognition of a soul that carries weight. She spoke to me in my own language, accented and imperfect. You read our law more carefully than we did. I was so tired I could barely stand. I managed 4 words. I had free time. She almost smiled. I walked back to the human observer section. Ambassador UN was waiting. She looked at me for a long moment and said, "You just changed everything, Sergeant. I hope you are ready for that." I sat down in my too small chair behind the thin rope. My hands had finally stopped shaking. I did not save the princess because I was brave. I am not brave. I saved her because it was the right thing to do, and because I had read the manual, and because sometimes the youngest, smallest, most insignificant species in the room is the only one stubborn enough to stand up and say what everyone else is too afraid to say. That is the human edge. Not technology, not military power, not brilliance. Just pure, unreasonable, stubborn refusal to stay silent when something is wrong. The Concord has ruled the stars for 40,000 years. They have forgotten what that looks like. We have not. They gave us a seat behind a rope and told us to watch. They never considered that we might actually learn something.